For the past year and a half, Washington Democrats have continually found new ways to be wrong about the U.S. economy. Last springtime, Democrats insisted their plan to dump $1.9 trillion onto the economy would not cause inflation. Here was the Democratic leader in March of 2021. I do not think the dangers of inflation, at least in the near term, are very real. And here was President Biden. The biggest risk is not going too big, it's if we go too small. Well, obviously, they were entirely wrong. Their reckless spending fueled the worst inflation in 40 years. As Ms. Alvarado, a teacher and mother of three, explained to a reporter, here's what she said: when I say, okay, we cannot buy anything this week or else we'll go into overdraft, my husband says, no, what are you talking about? We're both working. That shouldn't happen. Well, Madam President, it shouldn't have happened. But it's exactly what Democrats' policies have inflicted on working families in our country. Every time I fill up our van, I'm flabbergasted, Ms. Alvarado explains. I'm always worrying. I can postpone the mortgage by 2 weeks, but then it becomes 2 more weeks. And then all of a sudden, they're calling you. After Democrat policies that did cause inflation, they moved on to their next wrong prediction. President Biden admitted inflation did in fact exist, but said it was, quote, expected to be temporary. That wouldn't work out either. That was over a year ago. Then 7 months ago, in early December, President Biden promised inflation had peaked. Wrong again. It didn't peak in December. It just kept getting worse. Inflation set a fresh, new 40-year high just last month. Well, now these same folks are preparing for yet another battle against reality. In advance of the GDP numbers coming out later this week, the Biden administration has begun their latest project, a frantic effort to redefine the word recession. The White House published a whole explanation insisting that even if the new data suggests that our country is in recession, we actually won't be. It's almost beyond satire. The White House isn't focusing their energies on correcting their mistakes and making the economy better for working families who are hurting. Instead, their priority is telling everybody things aren't as bad as they look or feel. They want working Americans like Ms. Alvarado to believe Democrats spin instead of their own lying eyes. I guess the whopping 42% of Americans who say they're struggling to stay where they are financially are supposed to read the White House press release and cheer up. The same people who said inflation wouldn't happen, and then said it would be transitory, and then said it had peaked last year, are now insisting we aren't headed into a recession. Well, draw your own conclusions. Now, on another matter, staring down the barrel of economic disaster they've created, Washington Democrats still don't appear to be pumping the brakes on their reckless agenda. For example, the same Democrats who spent our country into inflation are now angling to regulate our medical cures industry into fewer new cures and fewer life-saving treatments. American researchers and manufacturers are the driving force behind cutting-edge treatments that the entire world relies on. American innovators are leading the races to cure terminal illnesses like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. The entire world benefits from our genius, but in particular, the American people get first and fastest access to the latest new treatments, cures, and medical marvels. But the Democrats' pursuit of prescription drug socialism could put all of this at risk. arbitrary, top-down government price controls would dry out the wealth of American innovation to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars in lost research and development. And American patients would feel the pain. The cost of breakthrough cures is measured in dollars, but the cost of neglecting them would be measured in lost years of American life. One academic analysis pegged the true cost at a cumulative 331.5 million years. So let me say that again. One expert says the negative effects of Democrats' proposal on medical research would cost a collective total of 331.5 million cumulative years of life. In other words, their proposal would eventually destroy as many of American lives as there are Americans to live them. Just 2 years ago, Democrats were lining up with Republicans and the rest of the country to cheer the American researchers and innovators who were driving the race for a COVID-19 vaccine, a race they finished in record time. The American people know what it looks like when life-saving advances happen right here at home. Unfortunately, they may be about to find what happens when they don't. Now, on one final matter, over the weekend, Burma's long and difficult struggle toward democracy and freedom took another dark step backward. The brutal military junta controlling Burma executed 4 political prisoners, including the well-known activists Ko Jimmy and Pho Zia Thaw, a former elected official and protest musician. Yet more innocent blood shed for the crime of dissenting against the junta's illegitimate rule. This is yet another atrocity in a long list of horrors committed by the junta with no legitimacy, no regard for the sanctity of human life, and no respect for its fellow citizens. It provides even further evidence the junta does not fear any consequences for its actions, not from internal chaos, not from civil war, not from its neighbors, not from the so-called international community. The United States has led efforts to support Burma's people and to impose costs and consequences on the junta. Clearly, it's time for Burma's neighbors to shoulder a larger burden as well. It's time for ASEAN states to step up individually and collectively. As the junta plunges Burma deeper into chaos and civil war, the turmoil will affect the entire region. It is Burma's neighbors who have the most economic influence over the junta, and it's Burma's neighbors who have the most at stake. Do they want a failed state racked by civil war like Syria on their borders? Do they want a Russian or Chinese-backed client state in their midst? If they will not step up and impose meaningful costs on the junta, the Biden administration should use the authorities already given to it by Congress to sanction Burma's energy sector, including Myanmar oil and gas enterprise, notwithstanding the concerns of those neighbors. The people of Burma are risking their lives, and in some cases losing their lives, to defend their freedom. The Biden administration claims to prioritize democracy and human rights in its foreign policy. Here is an opportunity to demonstrate that it means what it says. So in sum, it's time for Burma's neighbors to act. If they do not, the Biden administration should sanction Burma's energy sector and other major sources of revenue for the junta.